It's one of my favorites. And I have some opening words from the late UU Reverend Gordon Bucky McKeeman, who said, "We summon the power of tradition and the exhilaration of newness, the wisdom of the ages and the knowing of the very young. We summon beauty, eloquence, poetry, and music to be the bearers of our dreams. We would open our eyes, our ears, our minds, and our hearts to the amplest dimensions of life. We rejoice in the manifold promises and possibilities." So I'm happy to welcome everybody here this morning and everybody on Zoom, no matter where you come from, how you got here, how you are here, who you love, you are welcome here. Many UUs are starting this month of awakening to who and what came before us, who we are now, who we would like to be in the future, and to each other. Here at UUFM, we have a big month to be awake for. Our annual meeting is coming right up. If you're a member, please be sure to join us. We need you next Sunday, April 10th, on Zoom. Register ahead of time in order to vote. The following Sunday, we'll be celebrating this season of awakening and the Christian holiday of Easter. We'll have an all-ages egg hunt and a potluck after the service. That sounds like we may be opening up. The potluck will be outside. Very good.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm Pastor Isabel Call. It's my honor to serve as the minister here at the UU Fellowship of Manhattan. Our service today is titled "The Strenuous Contours of Enough." So I'd like you to call to mind a vast contour map of the land upon which we gather. Contour maps depict the elevation changes across large areas of land. Lines are drawn at the same elevation, and sometimes different colors are painted between the lines. In a flat place, there are no lines. In a hilly place, there are many curves. So Doug is going to show us a contour map of where we are right now. And you'll see the fellowship marked on this map that comes up. We're nestled into a hill that gets taller and taller to the south and slopes down across the road toward the Kanza River. Awaken to being here. If you're joining us online, imagine yourself here on Zinedale Road. And now imagine all the hills and valleys between us and the land where you live. And now all the hills and valleys between us and the other lands where you have lived in your life, where you have traveled, where you were born. And then bring yourself back to this place, this contour of the map, and let this place, this moment, be enough. Through anthropological research and oral history, we know that many of the people who lived interdependently with this land for centuries and millennia traveled a great deal. They weren't motivated by greed, as many economic models assume people are. These were complex and interrelated societies, and they practiced hospitality and curiosity across diverse languages and cultures in communities that were both stable and responsive to changing times and ecological conditions. Many Indigenous American communities' names for themselves simply translate as human beings. We gather together this morning a community of people largely, perhaps entirely from elsewhere. We choose as our ancestors the human beings who value individual freedom and collective responsibility, people who move across the landscape motivated by their humanity. We divest from the spoils of the inhuman practices of settler colonists and the US government who exploited this land and killed, injured, and forcibly removed the Kansa, whose deep, honest claim to this land transcends property rights.
So, Carl has very generously volunteered, said yes when I asked him to help with the chalice lighting. And I have words here from the UU Reverend Suzelle Lynch. The fire of love burning deep in every human heart calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we're called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we now have lit guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living things in its sacred embrace. And now we have another hymn, and Renee chose a new one to me. So please rise in body or spirit and observe, imagining perhaps how great it will be when we can sing again. Hymn number 60, In Time of Silver Rain.
In time of silver rain, the earth puts forth new life again. Green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads, and over all the plain the wonder spreads of life, of life, of life. In time of silver rain, the butterflies lift silken wings, and trees put forth new leaves to sing in joy beneath the sky. In time of silver rain, when spring and life are new.
Wow, that one is interesting. Yeah. So for our time for all ages, please keep your seats for now. We're going to watch a funny video called Awkward Things to Give Up for Lent. So Lent, if you're not familiar with it, is a practice done by some Christians during the 40 days before Easter. Lent commemorates the time when Jesus went to the desert to meditate and pray before he became a public minister. During this time, he prepared spiritually by fasting, which meant that he cut way back on the amount of food he was eating. Christians today sometimes fast during Lent, but they also might do other things to focus their intention on prayer. They might give up certain foods like meat or chocolate, or stop watching TV. Whatever they choose, the idea is to make their lives less complicated so they can be really awake and alert for Easter. So this video is a joke about things people might choose to give up for Lent. While you're watching, I want you to notice which things are really funny to you. And then maybe what jokes you don't think are funny and why. And then after the video, we'll have a little panel discussion about it.
Oh, here. Why don't you use this?
No napkins. Gave it up for Lent.
Go.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
You got it. You gonna get that?
Nope.
All right, I'm gonna need you to sign right here.
Okay. All right.
Okay, this is
That's-
our...
Yeah, that's an S in an H.
Hey, Renee, we're gonna be late for class. We gotta go.
Oh no! And then I was like, why did you do that? That was so dumb. And I don't know. But it all has to do with Pope being called. Hey, Joe.
Good morning.
You know this is an important meeting, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't you fix your hair?
Well, this year for Lent, I decided it might be a good idea to try humiliating myself.
How about you limit it to a litany of humility next time?
And I still haven't gotten a reply from Mother Angelica. I wrote her like years ago.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but I really don't think that she
Why are
ever...
your hands like that?
Oh, it's to remind myself over Lent that my life is supposed to be a prayer.
Oh, that's nice. Whoa, what's wrong?
I kinda have an itch on my back.
Oh.
And... yeah, this is not...
Oh, what are you gonna do?
Actually, hold on. I think I got this. Ah, there we go. All better.
All right, thank you, Doug. And thank you, New Catholic Generation, for that fun video. So if you would like to come up and chat about this video, you are most welcome. So I'm going to invite people of all ages if you want to chat a little bit. All right, so I'm waiting for the mic to pick me up. Is it on? All right, so what did you think was funny in that video?
When the guy said, no napkin.
Yes, no napkin. Anybody else? What else was funny? Opening the door with his foot, yeah. Any other highlights?
Touching the cup with his lips. That
Or not, yeah.
or not, yes.
So how can it be fun to choose not to do something?
So I think it's interesting, like some people have like workarounds, and I always find that like questioning, are you really sacrificing something? If you're substituting it with something else, it might be just as bad. So I always question that intention, but I also think it's a good way to be creative about other things you can do instead. So if you use that for the good, go for it.
Yeah, so maybe it's actually more fun to just throw water on your face than to use your lips. So, was there anything in that video that wasn't funny?
What was that again?
Was there anything that wasn't funny?
Well, I kind of worry about not answering the phone. I mean, lots of times that's the proper thing to do, but you don't know that until you've answered. And sometimes it's important.
It's Sandy saying that one got the biggest laugh, though.
I'm not a makeup wearer, but someone being scared that someone else doesn't really look like who they are, that was a little iffy for me.
Maybe on a tangential note to that is the idea that they needed to all give something up at the same time for the same reason. I guess I'm just sort of temperamentally distrustful of large organized religion, and it seems more like a instrument of social control.
I do think giving up my shoes is a good idea, though, so.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I noticed the makeup thing too, because I also don't wear makeup, and I don't really want to scare people just by, showing my face. But yeah, so it made me think about jokes and when they're funny, and I think it can be fun to make fun of yourself, and even like your community, if you have a community together where you do things, like you can make a video about your tradition. But it's not so funny to make fun of other people and what they choose to do. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I had. Why don't we head back to our seats or head back to class? All right.
Make sure I'm doing this right. So, we've been having, over the last few weeks, occasional testimonials about abundance. And since I'm usually good for a testimonial, and because I was convening today anyway, I agreed that this would be my week. So until the last few years, after signing the book here, as a matter of fact, I rarely felt abundance in my own life. Not that it didn't happen, not that I couldn't recognize it, but it wasn't something, I did recognize it because it happened so seldom. Childhood stories of Dickensian waifs and Tolkienian obligations really seem to either instill or reinforce an acute, maybe exaggerated sense of how close to the edge I was at any given moment. And as an adult, despite my middle-class 21st century North American white male cisgendered lifestyle, my security, the integrity of my existence just didn't feel real or reliable. I didn't feel particularly real or reliable either. I felt tenuous most of the time. Despite holding a full-time job, adult responsibilities to and for other people. But I came to a much clearer perception of reality, the reality of abundance through, of all things, disciplined exercise and abstinence. And I'm not talking about Lent. I tried Lent several times, going so far as to give up coffee and beer one year. Tea and wine worked just fine, Jessica. So, you know, it wasn't that good. It did make me pay attention, and I appreciated that. But a disciplined exercise of abstinence did wonders, and still does occasionally. Several years ago, there were a short spate of articles in the media about several interesting physiological effects of extreme calorie restriction. Frankly, it sounded pretty harrowing and not at all the lifestyle for an indulgent type like me. But there seemed to be ways of doing it for short stints without actually suffering any hunger. That was a concept I could get behind. After a couple of successful attempts, I discovered that my own inflammation, blood sugar, and sleep patterns responded noticeably well, and the benefits of the exercise long outlasted its brief requirements. And now don't misunderstand, I'm not advocating this for anyone, really. And I typically only do it when certain, usually seasonal indulgences overcome the lasting effects of doing it in the first place. So the first thing I noticed was that eating only certain small amounts of certain things at exactly the right time of day was pretty stressful. And I started thinking, how hungry could I get? The third or fourth time around, I just chucked the food altogether for a few days, and that's where things really got interesting. Not visions or anything mystical, but choosing only a brief, defined absence of food. I quickly noticed how abundant, not just food, but everything else was. How much I have available to me all the time, materially speaking. And all it took was a shift in awareness, paying attention to not doing something that otherwise would have been a thoughtless, just, oh, there's some. So choosing hunger, which didn't even last all that long, turns out the more you do it, the less hunger you actually experience. It was like cleaning off a smudgy window to see not just how much I enjoy, but also how much I might have to offer in general, both materially and in patience and caring and empathy. it takes a lot of patience with yourself to do without something that would otherwise just seem natural. And that exercise and discipline put me in a mind of people who maybe weren't making a choice, but still going through the same privation. And it tracked well with my experience supporting UUFM, actually. The idea of pledging in a church was one of the things, one of several things, but a significant thing that put me off joining a church for years. In fact, I'm glad I did. It did, because the churches I was considering at different times in my life weren't this one. And when I did join this community, I was hesitant to pledge, but not from selfishness or a lack of desire to contribute, but really from fear that I couldn't make the obligation. But I never regretted any of my contributions. In fact, the regret I did feel was that I couldn't do more. I do support myself and my family, but a critical way that I give back to myself and to the greater community is by supporting my Unitarian Universalist Fellowship family here, by being here and participating here. Let me go back, by being here, by showing up and participating and giving here and knowing the people here, whether I can see you or not. To borrow a phrase from my dad, Larry, you all make me better. And I have never, ever felt like the investment wasn't worth more than every bit that I had to offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Here at UUFM, the offering we receive on Sunday morning goes to a special organization this month. And so this month, what's in your programs isn't correct. We're actually supporting the Fairy Godmothers. And we have here today Karen Roberts from the Fairy Godmothers, who will tell us about the organization. So I welcome you.
Thank you very much. It's so great to be here today. Thank you for inviting Fairy Godmothers to be a part of your program. And I'm excited this year that I get to meet with you in person. I think I sent a video in last year, so this is really, really fun. We really appreciate your partnership as we support the health and well-being of women in our community. Grants are the heart of who we are. We bridge the gap to meet immediate needs not met by traditional funding sources. Most often, this support is in the form of car repairs, medical bills, and mattresses or beds. Women work through Shepherd's Crossing to express their needs and to find matches between their needs and the funding. As a reminder to you, we are an organization of over 700 members throughout our being in existence for 15 years. Do you know our story? A Manhattan woman met with her financial advisor to make a donation to women in the community. They didn't find an organization, so they began communicating with others in the community and created Fairy Godmothers. Our members care and our members want to help. They want to make a difference in the lives of others in our community. So let me give you an update of the grants we provided during 2021. In our general grant fund, we gave 101 grants for a total of $62,258. Those grants were provided at a maximum of $800. So that's a lot of help to many people in the community. We also have a second grant program now. It is called Hand Up Grant or HUG grants to support the education of non-traditional women. These grants provide $1,500 per semester twice for students attending Manhattan Area Technical College, Bellis Academy, Manhattan Christian College, and K-State. In 2021, we gave 8 scholarships for a total of $12,000. Let me come back to this year. In January, we gave general grants in the amount of $7,041.79. The needs are pretty great out there right now. 6 grants for car repairs, 2 for dental work, and 2 for mattresses. I want to just tell you a couple of the stories. This Manhattan resident is a single mother with a daughter. She's trying to get back to work, but needs her 2002 car to be reliable before she can commit to a job. She needs a new battery, new axles, and tire repair, and we were able to help her. Another woman was in an abusive situation, and she, along with her son, moved to the crisis center. She had just found housing, but she and her son are sleeping on the couch. She requested a grant for 2 mattresses. Those are the types of things that I just want you to remember that we do. We enjoy what we do. We're so appreciative for your support and donation. It's because of people like you that we can support women and families in the community. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Fairy Godmothers. You can donate by going to uufm.net/ and then you click the donate link, and you can choose the particular fund. So choose Helping Hands. If you're here in person, you can put a donation in the basket in the back. So we're going to be hearing offertory from Renee. This is Reflections on Enough. And she will be, we talked about this, she'll be playing with her left hand to rest her right hand, which is injured right now. So Reflections on Enough. And I'd like to invite you, while we're listening, if you have a joy or a sorrow, to write it on the slip of paper, and Chris could come around and get them. So Reflections on Enough. Thank you, Renee. So for our joys and sorrows this morning, I'll be reading the ones that came in here, and we have Rob Morrison, our Zoom host, will be reading the ones that people have shared in the chat. So if you're joining us on Zoom, you can turn your camera on. We might see you on the screen here in the sanctuary. So first joy, Ramadan began on Friday evening. Ramadan happens the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, and many Muslims observe it as a month of fasting, prayer, and reflection while engaging in humanitarian activities. So for all of our Muslim siblings, Ramadan Mubarak, which means blessings for Ramadan. You all want to say that with me? Ramadan Mubarak. Today here in the sanctuary, we have two joys. From Larry Weaver, it is a joy today that my friends Dave and Irene are visiting for these few days. Welcome, Dave and Irene. And Jessica Sievers, formerly known as Jessica Goring, shares sometimes adding things to life makes things too burdensome and therefore unhappy. I am casting aside many things in my life, and the relief is palpable. I'm thanking my UU community as I go through these changes. Thank you for sharing. And I will also share some joys and sorrows that I've heard throughout the week. Today we're joining in relief and joy with Stacy Brofman and Tom Phillips. Stacy's father is recovering from a major medical event against all odds, and he's doing incredibly well. Stacy recently returned from New Mexico after a couple weeks of caring for him, and today she and Tom are at Stacy's daughter's wedding. So congratulations to Corey and Adam. And then we have an update from Lynn and Lauren. So right now it looks like Lynn will need additional therapies to heal from breast cancer after surgery she had last Monday. She, Lauren, and Lynn's sister Jan will know more specifics on this Wednesday after visiting her surgeon and other specialists at KU Med Women's Cancer Center. So Lauren shares, we hope to have the start of a plan that day. The prospect of the next steps for a cure is unnerving, distressing, and very unwelcome in our lives. But during the past week, there has been an extensive and humbling expression of love through gifts, goodwill, positive thoughts, and prayers from many friends and relatives here in Manhattan and other parts of the world. These beautifully expressed sentiments have generated comfort, confidence, and inner strength, with which we will confront the challenges of time, distance, and treatments involved in curing the illness. So Lauren and Lynn are very grateful for the support they've received from those of us who have known about the situation, and they look forward to more opportunities in our circles of care for experiencing true friendship, learning, persisting, and succeeding in the healing process. So we're thinking of you, Lynn and Lauren. Rob, are there any joys and sorrows coming in from our community on Zoom?
Yes, we have one joy from Mark Mayfield, who says that his daughter Clara turns 21 today, so that's exciting. And we also have one sorrow from Harriet Jenke, who says a friend from Hope, Kansas, Anita Hummel, passed away from lingering effects of COVID. And so those are what we have online today.
Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for sharing from your lives and being here to hold the joys and sorrows of each other. I invite you to hold all these and everything that remains unspoken in our hearts. Well, I read a prayer inspired by, this is inspired by the Fatiha, which is the foundational chapter of the Quran. This isn't a translation, it's just an interpretation for you all this morning, and we will take a brief moment of silence afterwards. O divine presence of many names and no name at all, Look upon us with compassion so that we may be compassionate with others. When we make mistakes, let us find mercy within our community and within ourselves. Help us find our gratitude for this amazing experience of being alive. Wake us up. O source of compassion and mercy, if we worship anything, let it be you. Let all the advice we seek bear your clarity. Help us discern the truth. Relieve us from the compulsion to understand everything in order to feel safe. As we navigate the strenuous contours of enough, may we find the help we need without forgetting our own agency. May we set boundaries against harm without closing our hearts. May we let go of anger even when the path is hard. May it be so. Amen.
Life has loveliness to sell, all beautiful and splendid things. Blue waves whitened on the cliff, smoldering farthest waves they sing, and children's faces looking up, holding wonder like a cup. Life has loveliness to sell. Life has loveliness to sell. Music like a curve of gold. Scent of pine trees in the rain. Eyes that love you, arms that hold, and for your spirit still delight. Holy thoughts that start the night. Life has loveliness to sell. Spend all you have for loveliness. Buy it and never count the cost. For one white singing hour of peace, count many a year of strife well lost, and for a breath of ecstasy, if all you have been or could be. Life has loveliness to sell. Life has loveliness to
That was fabulous. Wow. Thank you, choir. I don't know who was singing in that. Who was singing? Okay, we have the Beemans here. Yeah, thank you all so much. Beautiful. So I've been inspired by how much I've been learning from everybody about your lives. And so today I'm going to share more about my experience as an economist and how it brought me here to you all. I'm hoping, every time I hear your all's stories, I learn more about myself. It gives me an opportunity to reflect on my own life. So I hope sharing some of my own story does that for you. The map of my life has had a lot of contours. Dare I say enough contours, maybe more than enough. But then again, I'm grateful for how each of my experiences has shaped me for this moment. My path has made me resilient. Slowing down, I see some people are having a hard time hearing me. I don't know if captions are an option that might be helpful. We also have those headsets in the back. I'll adjust my box here too. So slowing down, taking a long break from moving all over the place here in Manhattan, I can remember and reflect on my own journey. In my memories, I can climb up and down the stair-step contour lines of my personal history at a measured pace without getting disoriented or winded. In this practice of remembering, I awaken to themes. They are kind of like contour lines stretching across time and space, elevations I've crossed and recrossed, noticed or ignored, sometimes traveled along for a spell. One theme in my life is Islam. Islam is the Arabic word for surrender or submission, as well as sincerity, safeness, and peace. It's a hard concept for a headstrong American, but it's one that I can't shake. I took my first class on Islam in college. It was full of unfamiliar ideas. I didn't do great in the class. I feel like I didn't get it. But being perplexed was refreshing. It helped me stay curious and open to learning. The year before, I had decided on a major in economics. I'll tell you the moment I got hooked. My Econ 101 professor, Mr. K, had explained how, in a market with lots of buyers and sellers, everybody pays the same price for the good, even though they value it differently. You can imagine lining up all of the buyers by how much they were willing to pay. And the ones at the top end are just thrilled because they're getting something they really want and they don't have to pay nearly as much as they were willing to. The person at the other end is like, meh. They get just enough happiness or usefulness from the good at the going price to be willing to buy it. In a market with just one seller, a monopoly, that seller should charge a higher price to maximize their profits. Some of the people at the meh end drop out. The monopolist doesn't mind because the extra money from everyone else makes up for the loss. Everyone else is still in, but they're less thrilled than they would have been if the price were lower. Okay, third scenario. This is nearing the end of the econ lesson. We have a single seller who has the power to charge a different price for each person. Now, everyone in the original lineup can afford it. They each get just enough utility from the good to be willing to pay the unique price they're being charged. But nobody is thrilled except the monopolist. But what's cool about this scenario is that everybody's in. So here's what hooked me. Mr. K said, this model, this last setup, is what our college had done with tuition. They set the tuition at the highest possible price, and then they give people discounts based on how much they were able to pay. Coming from a low-income single-parent household, I had been thrilled by my big financial aid packet. But now I realized I'd been snookered, just like everyone else. I wasn't being given a discount. I was just being taken for all I could pay. So now, though, I was thrilled in a different way. I feel like the world made a little more sense. I'd been told a secret about how things worked, and I wanted to know more. So I took more classes in econ, I learned more secrets, and I thought I got it. After college, I moved to Indonesia for a couple years. Most of my friends there were Muslim, some were Catholic, and though we didn't talk about religion, it was everywhere. The call to prayer 5 times a day reminding me I was out of my element. It kept my curiosity alive. The most important thing I learned in Indonesia is crystallized in a memory from the kampung, which is a small, dense, resilient urban neighborhood of very, very low-income families. And I taught English there in partnership with a small group of young anthropologists, local folks who were doing grassroots organizing. We were sitting, chatting, drinking tea on a mat on the floor in a beautiful structure the neighbors had built from concrete, bamboo, rebar, and metal sheets. And they'd purchased all these materials with a collection of about 1 cent per night per household for 10 years. As usual, I was asking questions, trying to learn vocabulary, deducing who was cousins with whom, trying to build models in my head of how things worked, trying to understand the secrets. And my friend Muklas looked over at me and he said, Isabel, relax. It was good advice because all of my mental gyrations were not getting me anywhere. I was not going to ace this class. There was no way to understand another community except maybe by being present. I did go back to economics, though. Surely I couldn't sit around and drink tea all day. If I truly loved the kampung, I thought I should bring them something actually useful for the global economy. I imagined gathering up a whole bunch of tools in grad school and coming back to the kampung and dumping them on the floor of the community building, and then watching the young people use them to do cool stuff. So jumping ahead a few years, I was in PhD land when I first heard the phrase, the strenuous contours of enough. I had just returned from a research trip to Kenya. I was reeling from the secondary trauma of seeing so many people in poverty. I was also reeling from the moral injury of being complicit in their poverty, being a part of a global superpower that benefits from colonialism and neo-colonialism in Africa and around the world. In Kenya, my privileged economist role had not granted me access to relaxed conversations among young community organizers and resilient neighbors. The tools were heavy, and I was using them on my own or with other disconnected expats, making complicated gifts that the communities we served didn't really have a use for. I looked back at my initial passion for economics. I had been hooked by the model of the college as a price discriminating monopolist. This model offered rationality to my world. It gave me a role to play. I'd been at the far end of a line of people, someone who would have been priced out under a different price regime. And it also gave roles to the other people around me. It lined us up. But now I noticed how much the model missed all the non-linear relationships and the huge role that each of the students played in our education, individually and collectively. We were not mere consumers, with our surplus being siphoned off. We were also community builders, networkers, itinerants, investors, future donors. At this point, I'd spent a few years specializing in economic models of farm households. Maize and bean farmers in Kenya are really different from corn and bean farmers in the US. Besides subsisting on sometimes less than 2 acres of rocky soil, they also defy categories of producer or consumer. They buy inputs and produce food, which they sometimes eat. They also produce some of their own inputs, like seeds and manure, and they purchase food on the market to eat. I'd been interested in how changes in relative prices shifted households in the different markets, and specifically how this would change as climate change messed with yields and prices. But I could not get the model, complex as it was, to truly predict what I was seeing in Kenya. Every time I blinked, my model turned these farm households into Americans. Either they should convert the whole shebang to corn and buy all their other food, or they should sell everything and move to the city. But though urbanization and monocropping are happening in sub-Saharan Africa, it's not what the resilient farmers I met wanted or intended to do. So spinning in frustration back in my room in California, I clicked on my radio to a story about a woman with a severe illness. All of the medical treatments she tried hadn't worked, and to some extent she gave up. She surrendered. She retired to a tiny cabin in the woods where she spent 6 months in isolation with a wood-burning stove. She'd go outside to smell the air and just be with the forest. She asked questions and then let go of the answers. She just waited. How much effort was enough, honestly, to stay alive? How much food did she need? How much life was enough for her? She lived. She stoked her resilience. She healed. She came to understand the strenuous contours of enough. The phrase stuck with me. I wrote it on a Post-it note and stuck it on my wall. It took me several more years to begin to understand it, though, to start to surrender. But eventually I admitted I would be more productive sitting around drinking tea than continuing as an economist. So I got myself to seminary, and I found there the contour line I'd forgotten meant so much to me: Islam. In seminary, I took Intro to Islam again, and then I took it again the next semester, and it was taught by a Moroccan Sufi, Sheikh Yasser Shadli. He called it kindergarten Islam. He taught us how to pray. Literally, he taught us the choreography and, most importantly, the spiritual posture of salat, which Muslims do 5 times a day. I learned to recite the Fatiha in Arabic. This is the foundational chapter of the Quran. And for many months, I did salat as often as I could, 2 or 3 times a day, every once in a while, 5 times in a day. That was really hard to do. So I knew I would never understand what it is like to be somebody who has done salat their whole adult lives. But I was curious what it would do to my body and my heart to live like a Muslim. All in all, it did really good things. It slowed me down. It was a portable friend, Muklas, saying, "Isabel, relax." I began giving attention to the natural world, knowing where the sun was in the sky, so I know when it's time to pray. Salat got me out of the delusion that I was in control of my life and could potentially save the world single-handedly if I got my model just right. We learned about Ramadan in kindergarten Islam, and it was coming up soon. This is my first year of seminary. After years of working, I was attracted to the simplicity of Ramadan. No matter how hard I worked, the world remained sick with poverty and climate change, and I was sick with grief about it. Perhaps healing is possible through surrender. That summer, I learned pretty quickly that fasting is not for me. My body tends toward not enoughness as it is, and I need regular meals in order to stay grounded and healthy. In fact, for me, eating can be a spiritual practice, interspersed throughout the day, like salat. I surrender my hyper focus on my to-do list, and I care for my body. I remember I am not a human doing. I am a human being connected interdependently with other beings. So every year when Ramadan comes around, I don't fast, but I notice. During the daylight hours, when it's time for me to eat, I think of the millions of people who are abstaining, and I appreciate my meal all the more. I reflect on what else I might surrender, like how Christians practice Lent. I don't practice salat now that I've moved away from the community that taught me. I realized I didn't feel comfortable appropriating another tradition without being in a relationship of accountability with others who practice it. But I'm so grateful for the ways that it changed me, the ways that it interrupted my habits of mind and gave me an opportunity to integrate my experiences. As a religious community, we here at UUFM don't share in the practice of Lent or Ramadan, but we do practice stewardship. Stewardship, surrendering our time, talent, and treasure to the larger community, is an opportunity for us to stop engaging in the world as if it's one big economy of buyers and sellers. As members of this community, we don't pay attention, we give attention. We each offer what we have to offer. There is no price for this community. There is no social scientist arranging us in order of our willingness to pay, and there's no monopolist scheming to get more. We are not mere consumers of this community, we are its producers, its builders, networkers, investors, guests, greeters. Just as my neighbors in the kampung pooled their resources to build a structure to host their events, you all built this room together. And being together, participating in Sunday services, chatting over coffee when that comes back or on Zoom, allows us to remember together that we are not primarily human doings. It's my firm belief that time spent in spiritual practice is what builds our resilience, and we need a lot of it for the future that's coming. Some people build their resilience by fasting, some by retreating to a tiny cabin in the woods. These are great, powerful practices, but this also counts. This being here now together is practice too. As the poets sang earlier, spend all you have for loveliness. Buy it and never count the cost. For one white singing hour of peace, count many a year of strife well lost. And for a breath of ecstasy, give all you have been or could be. May it be so. And so I invite you now to rise in body or spirit for our last hymn, Just as Long as I Have Breath. And I invite those of you at home abstaining from being here in person to sing boldly. And I invite those of you here in the room to abstain from singing, but still feel the words and the spirit of the song in your body.
We are not human doings, we are human beings. I have closing words from the UU Reverend Scott Taylor, who says in part, may it stay with you, this awakening, this beautiful grasp of who you truly are, never alone, always worthy, graced with a unique gift that the world surely needs. And if you lose it, if it slips through your busy fingers, or if it's drowned out by the noise of the world, remember you can always retrieve it here in this tender temple of equally forgetful friends who are always ready to sing you back to yourself. Amen. And I forgot to mention earlier, there will be one more small group discussion for people who weren't able to get to one of the earlier scheduled ones. We haven't determined exactly where yet, but it will be Friday at 7 o'clock. And you can sign up exactly the same way as we were signing up for all the others. Or just talk to me, and I intend to be sending out an email to our entire email list sometime today or tomorrow.